Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. And today I wanted to talk about the brand new news that Silco, none other than the major antagonist of Arcane, is going to be coming to Teamfight Tactics as a new 5-cost unit with the mid-set update. Now, this is a huge deal for a multitude of reasons that I kind of wanted to delve into today, so even if you have already heard the news, go ahead, sit back, relax, enjoy. We're going to be talking about some of the implications that I can see coming from Silco being added to Teamfight Tactics. Now, in case you either haven't seen Arcane or are otherwise unaware of what Arcane is all about, Silco is the major antagonist of the plot. He is the one who had a bit of a different opinion about the route the Undercity should take than his brother Vander. Vander was very much so a live and let live. We get along just fine down here, and we, as long as the topsiders stay out of our business, we're good. Whereas Silco really wanted Zaun to rise up and become its own nation. He wanted them to divorce themselves from the topside and to eventually surpass them. And it's this conflict that leads to Silco releasing Shimmer into the lanes and doing a lot of things to consolidate power and to try and take on the top side as opposed to letting them be. He's the guy who ends up essentially killing Vander. He's the guy who essentially ends up creating the Jinx we all know and love today, and he's one of the major antagonists of the plot. And he is a character who is going to be getting introduced to Teamfight Tactics as a new 5-cost unit. Now, this is an interesting concept for a couple of different reasons. First of all is that this is the first time we're having a non-champion character being added to Teamfight Tactics, which is a big deal for a couple of different reasons. First, this means that it's the start of Teamfight Tactics potentially branching itself away from League of Legends, right? Teamfight Tactics, this is the first unit, the first model and animations and particle effects and everything that they are designing for themselves, right? Everything else they have is all from League of Legends itself, right? Every other asset and animation and particle, right? It's all essentially ripped straight from League of Legends. And that's partially why TFT is still, and I don't want to make this sound so negative, but it's why TFT is still parasitizing the League of Legends client, right? Because it's way easier for them to make new sets when they don't have to create all the assets from scratch. If they can just reach over into League and say, hey, real quick, we're going to borrow Warring Kingdoms Garen for our new set, and then just sort of drag and drop him into the new mode, boom, done. You don't have to go through any of that work. Silco is the first attempt for them to create an asset on their own, in a major asset, right? Not just things like the coins or the little legends or the maps, but like something brand new and something playable. And that, I think, is a huge deal for Teamfight Tactics because it's the first little tiny baby step for TFT starting to become its own game, right? We're still a ways away, right? It's going to take a lot of time for them to spin up enough teams and enough animators and modelers and riggers and everything they need in order to create their own assets and sort of eventually divorce TFT away from League entirely. But it's a good first step, I think. And it's the first step of TFT eventually maybe becoming its own game. Instead of opening the League client to play it, you open the Riot Games client to play it. Super, super interesting to me and super exciting to see if that's the potential going forward. This is also the first time a non-champion character has been introduced into a game that League of Legends is creating, right? Which is, I think, a big deal for League overall. Obviously, Legends of Runeterra has some characters that exist, but they're not really characters so much. They're kind of named and they show up, but they don't do anything. Silco, on the other hand, we've actually seen him as a character. We know kind of how he acts. We know how he talks. We know generally how he thinks. That's a little bit different in my eyes than just saying, oh, okay, yeah, there's, Rasa the Sunderer is a named character in Runeterra, but he doesn't actually do anything, right? Like, this character exists for more or less no reason, versus Silco, who is somebody. And this is important to me because I feel like it's the games finally starting to look at the Runeterra IP as less of a background, for the champions, and more of a world in which characters can exist that aren't champions, and you can pull from it or find inspiration in this world for whatever you happen to need, right? Because obviously the League of Legends lore was originally created, right? Pre-Great Retcon was originally created as just an excuse plot for why we have all these characters beating the crap out of each other. And even after the Great Retcon and a lot of the development's been done on it, it still more or less has been established as this exists to give context to our characters. And that's really about it. The fact that Silco is finally being introduced to a game despite not being a champion, despite not being playable in League of Legends, and will never be playable in League of Legends, Riot did say he is not a champion. He will not be coming to the game. That to me means that it's a representation that the Runeterra IP is its own individual entity. It no longer stands as just a backdrop for the champions. It's a world, it's a universe, and you can find characters and inspiration from it that don't have to be related to League of Legends and don't have to be champions, which I think is a huge deal. Silco's also one of the first characters that's going to be in a major Riot game that isn't a champion, right? Like, even in Legends of Runeterra, in Ruined King, in TFT, it's all champion-based, right? Those are the biggest movers and shakers and players, and Silco is going to be the first character that isn't a champion that's going to be one of the playable characters. Like, that's really, really cool. Now, one of the things I am concerned about is not on the article that Riot themselves released, but in a separate news article that I will try to find the link for you guys down the and put it down in the description below. But they also said they were considering adding more Arcane characters to League of Legends as champions. This I'm a little more concerned about. On one hand, I do like the thought of the League of Legends team basically seeing what a lot of these other teams are doing and saying, hey, that's really cool, let's do that, right? Like, we love that character, we love that design, we want to have that in our game. It's one of the things I talked about when I was originally mentioning how Legends of Runeterra and Teamfight Tactics and League of Legends were all going to be able to kind of borrow from each other as opposed to League dictating every single thing. But each of these games being able to create in their own regards, and then the other teams being able to draw inspiration from it. That's really cool, and that's something that I am excited to see them potentially doing, especially because it means that we have the odds of seeing Runeterra characters show up in League of Legends, right? I think everyone's been waiting for characters like Cythria or Commander Ladros or Tiana Crownguard to show up in League of Legends, given how popular they've been in Runeterra. That being said, I question the decision to add characters from Arcane to League of Legends as champions, given that most of the major characters in Arcane are non-combatants, right? Even Silco, who's getting added to the TFT, who will be fighting, it's hard for me to imagine Silco's auto-attack animation, right? It's hard for me to imagine Silco ever showing up on a battlefield, right? Like, he's not a fighter. He's a schemer. He's the power behind the throne. He's the guy who's in charge, but who never lifts a finger to do any of his dirty work himself. He does everything through proxy, or he does everything through shows of force. And so to me, Silco wouldn't make a good champion because he doesn't fight, right? That's not his style. If he's on the battlefield, something horrendously wrong has happened, and Silco doesn't let that happen given how well he plans everything out in advance. In a similar fashion, Mel Medarda, one of the other major characters in Arcane, is another one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me as a champion, because again, Mel isn't a fighter. She's a politician. She cajoles or bribes or threatens or blackmails or coordinates, or, right, like, that's what Mel does. She doesn't actually fight on her own, and even though there's a fan theory going around that she has some kind of Solari protection, and that's how they're going to get through at the end of Arcane, I don't necessarily think that she's a good character from a fighting perspective, which sort of leaves you with very few characters left to even consider, right? Most of the characters we see that aren't champions don't actually fight, and obviously they wouldn't want to add someone like Vander if that Vander is Warwick theory does hold true, and if that is the intent. Savika may potentially be a possibility, but I do wonder about Riot adding characters to League of Legends that aren't combatants just because they're from other games. It feels like those characters would then be unrecognizable, right? If you put Silco in League of Legends and said, yeah, and Silco's going to be running around killing people on his own, I'd be like, that's not Silco. That's not what Silco does, right? That's never what Silco's done. Why would you add him to the game in this fashion where I basically don't recognize the character anymore? Right, so I don't know how I feel about that, but I do think it's a really big deal for Silco, at the very least, to be in Teamfight Tactics. I feel like that's a little bit more of an easy reach for Riot, and I'm really excited to see if we end up having if we just end up having more of this in the future and more kind of characters like this. So either way, those are my thoughts on Silco being added to Teamfight Tactics. Let me know what you think of any of this down in the comment section below. If you love the thought of Silco being in the new TFT mid-set update, if you hate it, if you want to see Arcane champions in League of Legends, I would love to hear all that down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. There's a little bit of an extra special bonus one here, guys, so this one's on me. Anyways, once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.